Welcome to episode 2 of the Backwards History Podcast. The podcast's goal is to battle misinformation, miseducation, and all-around willful ignorance. I'm your host, Will, with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Shut up, Kevin. Today's episode, we're going to go through part 2 of our 10-part little-known history facts or
history misconceptions.
There we go. These are going to be a little bit more modern. We said 1920s and later last time. We're going to have to amend that a little bit. It's going to be late.
A little overlap.
Yeah, a little late 1800s to start out with on this one. Kevin, let's get this going.
All right, let's jump right in. The first one we would like to discuss today is the concept of, or the misconcept of, the mythological American cowboy. We've all seen westerns, spaghetti westerns, if you will. Usually it's a white guy, blonde hair, blue eyes, rising on a noble white steed to save the day.
Is that you, John Wayne? Sorry, I couldn't help it.
Oh, it's quite all right. Now, about 90% or so cowboys are actually either Mexican or African American. And that's why so many cowboy terms are of Spanish origin, such as rodeo. That'd be one of the most common ones. Now, this has been a prevailing myth in American history due to oversaturation in folklore and American cinema. A little side note, spaghetti westerns got the name because most of them were actually filmed in Italy.
Well, I mean, that portion of the United States we actually purchased from Mexico, right?
Oh yes, we took a lot of it.
We took a lot. I mean, we took a lot of everything, but prior to it being, U.S. territory, it was Mexican territory, so it would make sense that a lot of the inhabitants would still be Mexican or the descendants thereof.
Exactly. And some of the few purchases we made was
that was part of the Louisiana purchase, if I'm not mistaken.
Some of it was. Most of it came after the Spanish-American, or the Mexican War. I'm sorry, Spanish-American War does come a bit later.
A little bit.
We take the rest from Spain, but
right.
So that's one of the most prevailing myths in American history is I guess the Anglo-Saxon cowboy, if you will. Air quotes for those of you who can't see.
Air quotes
pretty
again.
much everybody. All right. So to move right on into the next one. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
I'll say the technology that ultimately rendered the cowboy useless.
Technology that rendered the cowboy useless. Well, it wasn't the cowboy that became useless.
Well, it was more the horse.
It was the horse and the buggy. Because the car... a lot of people think that the car was actually an American invention. They think that Ford came out with the Model T was the first automobile. But it actually was a European invention designed by Carl Benz.
That name should sound familiar.
Kind of like the Mercedes in my driveway. But he actually designed the first time it ran was New Year's Day in 1879. It was gasoline-powered engine. It was only a 2-stroke motor. I don't think it went very fast at all, but I mean...
Or very far.
But given the fact that you didn't have to feed the car... Well, I guess you kind of could say the gasoline was feeding the car, but... You didn't have to keep it alive.
Right.
And it wouldn't bite you or kick you or whatever. I mean, it would throw you out if you took a corner real fast because it basically looked like a wagon or a modified wagon with a
horseless carriage.
Horseless carriage, I mean, with a funny little motor in the back with this upside down, to me it looks like the stereotypical moonshine bottle. The one with you see in cartoons and stuff with the X's on it, and they turn it up. It was white. Well, this one was clear, turned upside down. I guess that was the gas tank at the time. But yeah, it was designed by Carl Benz.
Carl Benz.
Maybe that's why the dude's cars are so expensive.
Well, when you first went to do it, you set the price, I suppose.
I guess. But then you've got misconceptions about the stock market crash in the 1920s.
That's right. it became known as Black Tuesday. It was in October of 1929.
Supposedly. The story goes that a lot of brokers and bankers and people of that nature decided to off themselves when all of their stuff went belly up.
Right. The story goes that once the stock market crashed, which took a lot of people by surprise, people who lost everything in the crash flung themselves from their windows to their death. That's another story that has been blown out of proportion over the years. There's actually only 2 recorded suicides linked to the stock market crash during that entire time, instead of the hundreds upon hundreds of reported deaths.
So wait, you mean the media sensationalized isolated incidences?
Oh yes, and it's not the first time. If I could, we've all heard the story of the War of the Worlds. That was actually just a publicity stunt by newspapers to try to discredit radio.
Hey man, this is supposed to be 5 points, not 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. Once I start dropping knowledge, I can't stop.
Speaking of media manipulation, point number 4. Everybody knows the famous flag raising over Iwo Jima by U.S. Marines in World War II in 1945. Mm-hmm. There's even a memorial to it in Washington, D.C. There's probably several other statues around the country depicting several Marines hoisting up this really massive American flag under gunfire and everything else on a mountain on the island of Iwo Jima, Japan. That was actually staged. Yeah. They my understanding is they rose they planted a much smaller flag during the actual battle that day.
Right.
When they were actually under fire. And then one of the commanding generals, or since it was the Marines, it may have been commanding admiral, decided that it was not big enough.
Right.
So they sent him right back up the same hill later with this huge flag and made him do it all over again, just so they could get it on camera.
Right. And what it was, how much sense does it make to raise such a massive battle flag when you're taking enemy fire? But yes, raising the flag signalizes you've taken the island.
Yeah.
The island is now under U.S. occupation. But yeah, it was completely staged in an effort to...
it was propaganda.
Propaganda.
I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we're not these...
Right, let's call it what it is.
Yeah, we're not the white knights that we say we are with everything we do. It's propaganda. It's so that they can distribute it not only to the people back at home to still hold support for the efforts, but also to show to the indigenous people or what was left of the Axis forces at the time to say, hey, we're coming for you next.
All right.
You know?
And the propaganda continued after the fact because they took the Marines who were seen in the photo, or at least most of them, and they actually toured the country recreating that scene in an effort to raise money, war bonds and things of that nature.
If you've ever seen Captain America, the first one, the first Avenger, yeah. When he's touring around and he's doing all the shows with the...
punching Hitler out and all that.
Right. Shows like that were actually very, very common. I don't think Captain America was one of them. Of course, he very well could have been, because the Captain America character was actually...
I think it is loosely based off a real...
well, no, I actually think that the Captain America character came out around the time of World War II in comic books. So it could very well have been some dude could have been in costume, touring around doing that kind of stuff.
Oh, could have been.
It just wouldn't have been as famous as it is now.
Right, and definitely wouldn't be.
Because there is a comic book where Captain America is fighting Hitler that punches Hitler in the face in a comic book from the 1940s. So it's very well possible, but I don't know if that's a thing.
Homework for our listeners, yeah.
Listeners, I'm gonna go look that up. The heck with that.
Yeah, I'd be curious too. But who's off on tangent?
I'm not on tangent because that goes into number 5. Because
we got on
another
5,
beloved cartoon character from a little bit earlier, from 1928. Most people think that the mouse himself, Mickey Mouse, was animated by none other than Walt Disney.
The legend himself.
But they'd be wrong. He may have voiced Mickey Mouse. Mm-hmm. He may have been the driving force behind Mickey Mouse. I'm probably going to mispronounce this dude's name because it's really weird. But a guy named Iwerks, or Elworks, was the actual animator of Mickey Mouse, at least in his very first appearance in Steamboat Willie in 1928. A lot of people say that it was Walt, but it was actually somebody completely different. I didn't know that until recently.
Same here. Even people who study history regularly were constantly finding things out, were misled or just completely misinformed.
I mean, I think Mickey Mouse would technically be history, but it doesn't count as,
True.
typical history or what would be
pop culture.
It's pop culture history. I guess that works.
Yeah.
Still. But yeah, that's the more modern 5-6, Kevin. But
I don't think anybody's keeping count. Just you, but
no, the next couple episodes we're going to go on a different format. These were just a few hooks, let you know how we're
little appetizers.
looking at things. The next couple episodes we're going to look at diving in deep for full episodes on misconceptions from the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, and looking into segueing into
let's call it less popular topics.
Less popular topics. Yeah, it may be a little bit less lighthearted. We're still going to crack jokes. I don't think we can help it.
That's just who we are as people.
We are as people. But yeah, we want to dive in deep and get things going.
Let's not forget about our upcoming episode 5.
Episode 5, the naughty bits.
The naughty bits.
And then after that, we're going to have a special guest with some insight on
more recent history.
It's not that recent, but it's recent enough.
Right.
Give you a hint. It'll be a Cuban friend of ours.
Yeah, he'll be coming in to give us a little more personal insight. Like I said, episode 5 will be coming up. That'll be our lighthearted, more of a comic relief, but you'll still learn something, I promise.
So come back and you'll hear me tell Kevin to shut up again.
Of course.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what we can find that is definitely misconstrued about what actually happened in the Revolutionary War and Civil War. Most people think they hold it as gold, and
that's one shortfall, one pitfall a lot of people have is in history we want it black or white. It's either we're going to deify or we're going to demonize. We're never going to look at people as just people. I
mean, we can't help it. Considering most of the time we learned about at least in the realm of the Revolutionary War, we had a lot of the founding fathers. And we learned about those when we were kids. So, of course, they're not going to tell you the dark portions when you're children. They're going to romanticize a lot of everything or only tell you the good bits. Right. There's a lot of bad bits in there.
There's quite a few of those.
I mean, they're not as bad as some people, but
true.
They in some instances, they had their hearts in the right place. In the other portions, they had their hearts in their wallets, and
very much like people still are today.
Yeah, definitely.
If you study history, you'll learn the people may change, but their behavior rarely does.
So, just like with anything else you learned in history, and certainly anything you hear here, don't take our word for it. Trust, but verify.